Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have the wonderful team who brought the new Boss Baby family business film together, put it together and created this amazing piece of art and animation that I know all of our ASIFA members are excited to learn about. And so we are going to talk about the film. I'm going to ask some questions and we'll have, share information with you and insight. And then please, all of our friends who are watching, feel free to send in your questions via the Q&A feature. And later in the session, we'll start answering those questions. So let me start first by Tom McGrath, the director of the film. I'd like to feature you first and ask you, you've done so many things at DreamWorks and you've worked on so many projects over the years. I've known Tom a long time. We were just saying, wow, it's interesting. We've all been through lots in the animation business. We've had strikes, we've had studios going out of business, new studios starting business, but this was our first pandemic. And for the first time in history, we've all made movies from home. So let's just talk a little bit about that, and then we'll launch into talking about Boss Baby. But so Tom, for you, and then everybody else jump in as well. Let me know what it was like working on a movie, directing a movie, and then, working on a movie with teams spread all across the city, as well as across the country and possibly across the world.
Well, unprecedented, and who knows if it's going to happen again. But I think, it's a testament to our team in a way. I don't know, Jeff, how many people did we have? 300?
We eclipsed 400 crew in total by the end. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think the benefit for us is we had worked a year and a half together in the studio, and had a rapport, and some of the people I've worked, 6 films on, with, and a lot of new people that kind of came to the party too. But so, there was about a month of downtime going, oh my gosh, we got to finish this movie. How are we going to do it? And we had a lot of technical support and slowly weaned our way into working. I think for everyone, when we started working, it took 14 hours to do an 8-hour day. A month later, it took 12 hours to do an 8-hour day. So, once we had it down, it became business as usual in a way. And I think we've discovered new tools that allowed us to communicate better, because we're all artists and drawings kind of communicate the best. And so we had this sync sketch software where we could, whether it was layout, lighting, or animation, draw on top of the picture and scrub the picture and draw and make notes on it and communicate that way, so that an artist could take that back to their desk and kind of work on it rather than just talking about it. And as the more we got into it, I would say what was great about it in hindsight was the fact that, like we are now, we could all face each other.
Yeah.
And at the studio, there's people in the back of the room. The rooms are dark. No one can hear everybody. Mm-hmm. And the fact that everyone could feel like part of the conversation and contribute ideas or opinions was really valuable. Plus everyone's name is printed too, which is also great. But it just opened a forum to be more collaborative in a way where it felt like everyone could kind of talk about the work. We could talk to artists directly about the work, and hopefully we can bring that back to the studio, and make it more inclusive for everybody.
Fantastic. I'll bet, Jeff, you were sort of the unsung hero through part of this, because as the production is going on and all the artists have their needs, and the thought, it's hard enough to set up a film inside a studio, but you're setting up that everybody at home and all over with software and computers and Zoom challenges. I'm sure there were some very long days for you.
Very long, but I certainly can't take sole credit for that. I had a great team of people all around me, the folks you see represented here on screen with me, and hundreds more who aren't right now, and just everybody else within the studio. I mean, it was a huge collaborative effort to figure out quickly how to get us all to transition to work from home mode. And like Tom was saying, there was a moment where there were a lot of questions that didn't have immediate answers. And the hardest thing for us, there were things like this, like Zoom, like Google Meets and things like that were immediately available to us. But there wasn't something right off the bat for us that we could play and scrub media and hear audio and in real time as a group. and be able to see the same picture. And there are those tools that exist, but we weren't immediately connected to those. So that took a moment for us to figure those logistics out. And again, our technology team at the studio was huge in that effort to kind of line us up with some of those softwares. And there were a lot of interesting things that we learned along the way too, right? Things that were commonplace for us before were kind of lost. You know, the randomness of running into people in the halls, particularly on the other projects. Like we suddenly became very isolated in our own Boss Baby bubble, and you know, didn't get the benefit of seeing the other people within the studio as regularly, because to do that you had to set up one of these. It became more of a formal thing. But also we wound up gaining some benefits by the fact that we didn't have to move around from meeting to meeting across the campus. We actually could fit more meetings into the day because of that, but also that, you know, creates eye strain and things like that. We're looking at monitors suddenly for, you know, 8 to 10 hours a day, as opposed to getting up and moving around. So we kind of scheduled in breaks for everybody at periodic times in the day, where we wouldn't put any other meetings. It was kind of a dedicated time, so that it would force us to get up and move away from the computers for a bit, because otherwise we were locked in the same place all day. And that was something that quickly revealed itself as something we needed to help people with.
Yeah. You know, one thing that, Sue, just quickly, that was challenging, maybe Ramon and Theo couldn't talk about it, and Mike, is, you know, we were making a theatrical movie, and we chose to do, you know, 2:3:5 aspect ratio, because we wanted it to be very cinematic, and everyone's working on their smaller screens at home. And so the challenge was to get us into the studio so we could check it on the big screen, just to make sure it was working. I don't know, Ramon and Theo, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, please.
I think from my point of view, it definitely brought some surprises, because in order to get a good feedback at home, I had to play the movies on a very small size, you know, for it to be on a nice fluid 24 frames per second. And so when we did final camera at the studio, all of a sudden, things that you couldn't really see on a tiny screen, when you see it big, the smallest camera jerk or small things that you couldn't really see at home now becomes obvious. And so it definitely was some kind of a learning curve. Like, yes, I'm glad we did it at the studio.
And Theo, for everybody's benefit, why don't you tell us your full name and your position?
Oh, yes.
I should have asked everyone to like share their positions before we launched here.
Yeah, sorry, I should have put my full name. My last name is Bondoux. My first name is Theo, and I was head of layout on the movie.
Excellent. All right, Ramon, why don't you share your insight with us?
So I'm Ramond Zibach. I was the production designer. And the interesting thing, about going from the small screen to the big screen, and it kind of happens naturally too when we're making these movies, as you start getting pickier and pickier as you go. So you do end up looking for those details and those problems as you go. So for me, naturally, it kind of worked out that we were gonna fix things in image finaling or wherever it was as we went. But some things were surprising, especially, you know, are we fielded too tight? Like a lot of times it felt like just opening up the movie a little bit was really nice. And then it was like, oh shit, do we have enough stuff to outside of frame, you know, to set dress? But it was rare when that happened. Usually it was small changes that helped the movie just feel that much better when we actually got into the studio, which was kind of that was a big deal, getting on campus, being able to sit in the theater with, the limit was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 people, whatever it was, you know, sitting far apart, and
talking
so
through masks.
Yeah, it felt you know, everything that happened felt special during that year. I mean, everybody in their lives, but dealing with whatever they were dealing with, but dealing with the movie gave us a great distraction during a crazy time. So to me, it was like, where there's a will, there's a way. Right away, as soon as we went into lockdown, the crew was so into the movie and were so ready to start using the tools that it really was surprising how fast, at least on the art and lighting side. I know editorial had issues with trying to give Tom streaming playback and audio, but for the rest of us, it was like we barely skipped a beat, you know, because we were in our last year of production. We couldn't. So
yeah, I know.
we were flying.
Yeah. One last challenge is, usually we would show periodically to the studio or our crew the movie just to see if jokes are working. It's really important, that we didn't have that at all, So the one thing we did have, and Mike remembers this, Mike Amos, one of our lead animators who was the lead on Tina and one of our supervising animators. We had their kids, some of the kids would come to dailies over the shoulders of their parents. And so if we got a good reaction out of the kids, that was a good sign, At least we
became our test audience.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's
Some
great.
people's pets, but it's hard to read.
Kids and pets.
Yeah, there's a few animators that we used as just their kids. I mean, Mark Renicke's kids, I think, saw the movie as many times as we did because we just kept showing them our shots and like, is this funny? I mean, it was hard to know because, I think that's what we missed a lot is the dailies in person. At least you're in a room, a theater full of people. And if it's funny and you get a laugh, then you kind of think, oh, well, it worked. But when you're sitting in a Zoom chat and there's not that kind of group laughter, you kind of
and everyone's muted.
Everyone's muted, so you're just like, I've spent 3 weeks on this, and I thought it was funny, and there's no sound. You're like, oh, that didn't work. But we missed that part for sure. Yeah.
And Mike, please introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry, Mike Amos, and I was a supervising animator on the film, one of the 5 supers on the film, and then it was character lead for Tina.
And I want to encourage all of our viewers, our attendees. You need to see this film. And right now, for the ASIFA members, ASIFA was doing a screening. I think there was ability to screen this for a few days. So please check your emails and check your ASIFA information. The film is really funny, and it is quite, and the first film, Boss Baby, was great, but this one I think is funnier and artistically really, it's expanded. It's very wild and beautiful and very innovative. And I have to tell you that I thought Jeff Goldblum was absolutely amazing. The casting, that his character, there he is. He is worth the film all by himself. He's just a great character. And I would love for you to tell our audience the inspiration for doing this sequel.
Well, there was never really a plan to do a sequel on the first movie. It was felt like, oh, this is based off Marla's book. We expanded the world, and it was kind of a one and done idea. And then the studio, wanted to do a sequel, and which is great, but they also had the TV series going as well. And, you want to make sure you have a good story to tell, not just because it made money. And so I was taking a couple months off and just started thinking about it. And then my big partner in this, as well as Mike McCullers, who wrote the screenplay, and we worked together on the first one. And when you think about sibling rivalry or family, there's always a part 2 to that, and we started talking about, well, wouldn't it be great if we picked up where the first movie left off, where it was Tim telling his daughter about how he and his brother kind of reconciled their differences, and to actually pick it up 25 years later as adults. And we had this little baby in a suit, Wink, at the end of the first movie, not as to set up a sequel, but to let kids know that babycore is real. That was what the Wink was about. We thought, well, if Tim has this family, who would this family be? And what could we do with this little baby in a suit? And how could she be a great foil for Boss Baby? And it just started opening the doors. We had this formula for the first movie that could turn the villain back into a baby. So what if we took that formula and started thinking about, well, it's a fun idea. It's kind of Back to the Future in reverse. If they're grown adults, but they have to become kids again to reconcile their issues later on in life. And it just seemed like a fun idea to kind of play around with, and also open the door to have more opportunities for different perspectives, whether it was the father-daughter story or the brother story, and have different points of view. Because the first movie, for me, was very locked into, it had to be the 7-year-old's point of view because it's his imagination. And so Michael and I had read this article about how much pressure kids are getting in school. And it's, if you have kids and you're trying to even get him into a preschool or kindergarten, it's like going to college, and so we just thought, oh, we could shine a light on this, and make the school more like a game show place, and and the subjects are ludicrous and that sort of thing. So it's bringing all these ideas together with the theme of really it's never too late to have a second chance with family, that you can reconcile all the differences. And that sort of
I'm curious of all of you, like I have a twin brother, so boy, I understand sibling rivalry. How many of you have sisters or brothers here? So we can all understand that. I love the fact that you had the sibling rivalry, and then you have the point of view of the grandparents and the children, and the school is so funny. And you're right. I mean, school today, it is trying to get into preschool is like college, and teachers and parents treat it almost of this level of kids are learning things that out in life we hardly ever use. So it was fun. And I think it really captured the way kids feel about school, the intensity of it and the silliness of it sometimes. Can we talk? I would love to talk about the production design, especially I thought the way you did, the whole world was beautiful, but when you got into the school and the activities the kids are in, and the dome where, the timeout section, I'd love to share some of your thoughts about how you envisioned those worlds.
So, Tom always had all these great ideas, and half the time he's already sketching them before you start. So he has a very clear idea of what to play around with. The school was a lot of research. Like Tom said, we wanted to make sure that felt like it was in the vein of what people might kind of know with new age schools. And so design wise, we came at that with a bunch of stuff. And after a while, we started distilling it down to things that might make sense for Armstrong and his evil plan. So the hexagon and that shape as a base shape, and for the layout of the whole school, that was an idea. And then Tom and I, of course, love Ken Adams, who did all the production design for 007. So we were looking at that stuff, board formed concrete, and, Disney used that in Disneyland for the original, like Tomorrowland. That was one of the building materials. And that was a big inspiration for even the carousel layout of the classroom and how it changes. So it just kept layering on, all these great ideas when Tom was talking about what the school is. And
I just remember you brought the hexagon shape because like the kids were like worker bees.
Yeah.
The babies were worker bees, which is great. And you found this building in Brazilian architecture, I think, that looked like a stack of books. And you thought it would be great because it looks really imposing to Tim, who hates school and that sort of thing. We had talked about this because we wanted the film to be impressionistic, like old Disney backgrounds in a way, just to be completely honest, or like Capone's, Maurice Noble backgrounds, like the Ralph Phillips cartoons and things like that. What was great about those and why we set it in winter is we could have these negative spaces, and mid-century modern architecture was kind of minimal. So the characters would really read really well, and it would be harken back to the animation we would love too. And so I think Ramond did a great job of like kind of, even though it's CG, real world-ish, you still brought that aesthetic of traditional backgrounds and animation.
To tie that together with the same philosophy from the first film, there were lighting shapes. Maurice Noble was always a master at staging his sets basically with simple lighting shapes. So we would have those kind of rough ideas, but Theo and his team in layout, to be able to actually use those in actual shots early on to know what you're dealing with was kind of key to doing that. And that's what holds that style together. And that's kind of what I'm really happy about with this movie is we took it, a step further than the first movie, which it's in there, but we got to do even more of that on this film.
Excellent. It really is stunning. Mike, I'd be curious about some of your the animation inspiration and some of your thoughts in the character animation, and maybe we could talk a bit also about how there's 2D, there's the CGI animation, but then there are almost these 2D flat sequences.
Yeah, I mean, I think I worked on the first film as well. I was an animator on the first film, and there was, obviously Tom has such a love for like the old original cartoons from the 40s and 50s, and that's the stuff I love as well. So straight away, that's the kind of style that I definitely gravitate towards. So that sort of great Looney Tunes, Chuck Jones style of animation where there's really strong, very specific poses and expressions that are hilarious as well. I mean, just a slight raise of an eyebrow or something gets a laugh, and we love that kind of thing, as well as kind of the MGM cartoons like the Tex Avery stuff. We really like that sort of very cartoony, slapsticky style of animation as well. So we tried to look at those two different styles and build a lot of that in there, and try to build or grow upon what we had done in the first film and expand upon that, and try to make it even more cartoony and more pushed, and really sort of build that into the new characters that we could kind of introduce that to as well. So I think, that they were mainly the sort of the styles, and then obviously the voices drove a lot of kind of things for us too. I mean, having Jeff Goldblum and Amy Sedaris for me was just a huge inspiration for how she delivers her lines, and the phrasing of her dialogue is so funny. How quick she changes almost on a dime. She goes from happy to sad to crazy to angry to, like, it's all within one line, which is very fun, obviously, to animate. And then I think for the fantasy stuff, I mean, it was the movie already is very cartoony and fun and silly. And so then when you're fantasy, you want to try to even lift that again. And I think it's probably looking at the Ralph Phillips cartoons, but then we loved, there was the Disney one, Toot Whistle Plunk and Boom, that we really loved that style. And
Make Mine Music.
Yeah, those with, I think there was the one with the bumblebee, with the piano keys. We looked at a lot of that for some of it too, because I just loved that sort of very stylized, really kind of, almost over the top imagination that we just love that sort of things. And it's perfect for animation. I mean, it's an animation dream to work on that kind of stuff. So that's probably where it all came from, I think.
Plus, I think we also wanted the subtle acting too, with the broad stuff, and which was fun because it for different types of animators who like doing different types of things. Some like broad, some like very subtle, emotional. We kind of had something for everyone, which all couldn't have been done without Sandy.
I was about to say Sandy was important.
Yes.
Sandy,
yes.
Please introduce yourself.
Oh, hi, I'm Sandy Gao. I'm the character rigging supervisor on Boss Baby Family Business. So yeah, all the things that Mike and Tom and Ramond talked about to accomplish sort of this 3D, take this 3D object and make it 2D-like, we did put in a lot of different technologies. For instance, we have the ability to install sort of what we call the multi-limb system. So that means that when you see one character, but they have those arms, like going like this with the smears, those are actually separate copies of the character, but the rest of it just faded off. So you see arms floating in space, you can see a head or eyeball, much like what the traditional animators would do. So we have that all ability, the whole, all the TDs worked on, it's not just rigging, so it works through the whole pipeline. So that was really good because we learned from the first movie. They used it on the first movie, but we wanted to use it even more. So having that, we sorted out for this movie and was able to be more of like the animators press a button and then they install these like multiple characters and they could like add whatever,
Yeah, and each arm would, or, the thing was like with our fast action, we'd always lose it in the motion blur. It would disappear and that sort of thing. So we, where in 2D, you could just draw multiples or draw a smear or something. So the animators had that tool that Sandy saw, which is great. Yeah. And as they, as they went, they actually faded as they went back in time, so to speak. So it looked very much like a traditional animation. So if you ever freeze frame it and go frame by frame, it's pretty interesting to watch,
There's some pretty crazy shapes. Like we also gave them the smear effect, so you could like squish the 3D shape, hand, like it got stuck in a door, that kind of shapes. So I think the second film allows to develop a lot more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's a sequence where they drink this formula and they transform into their younger selves.
Yes.
And that's a great one to freeze frame because, and Mike had worked on that one too, is if you freeze frame when they're transforming, you can really see these rigs really, well, it was so easy to draw in traditional, you just couldn't do it with a computer. But these rigs that Sandy made with her team too are really fun and they really hold up no matter what you do to them. So that, you could freeze
I was
frame
watching that yesterday when I was watching the film. I watched it a couple times now. And as I was seeing those transformations take place, and I was wondering, how did they do that? Because at first I was thinking, oh, they animated this in 2D. And then it was like, no, this is kind of a blending of 2D and 3D and different, and it's so snappy. And the shapes hold up so well. It's really, it's quite fantastic what you did with that. And the way you then brought the different shapes as it went into the fantasy sections and the different shapes floating. And you had this sense of 3D and 2D and the lighting and, the crazy fantasy lighting going on, all of it together.
There's a pretty crazy tool that Sandy gave and it's contour. You could take the silhouette basically in almost a 2D aspect, start exaggerating the geometry to camera and design. That's the only way you can get that read. If you're doing that through separate little controls, it wouldn't be as easy, and it wouldn't be as easy to flow that kind of idea through the animation. And when I saw them doing that stuff, I was like, that's pretty great. And they're just pushing and pulling on this rig, and it's holding up. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, the fantasy stuff was really the dessert of the movie in a way for all of us. In a way, it was fun on the first movie as well to make it look as close to hand painted as possible and that old aesthetic. And we had an artist, Andy Schuler, who designed the fantasy sequences for both films. And we called it Andyland because he just goes into these worlds and creates them. And the challenging part about making it look painted where you feel the brushstrokes is it also has to be three-dimensional because we're also shooting it for stereo 3D and that sort of stuff. So it was quite challenging. And we knew on this one, we had this musical number that we really wanted to be special, where you were actually in the fantasy with the characters. And our head of story, Andy Erickson, had we were going to have Hans Zimmer write an original song, and then he suggested Sing Out, which was perfect for our needs of the storytelling. And so Jacob Collier, if you haven't heard of him, he's fantastic, arranged this song for us, and we knew we were going to have Ariana and James sing it. The tricky part is Theo laid out that whole sequence himself, and everything was designed to hit on the music. And it was kind of Theo's job to not only work with the camera, and we would talk about the choreography, but also as a cue to the animators of where things would hit in time with the music and that sort of thing. Maybe we want to talk about that.
That'd be great.
I mean, I didn't do it all. I had a great team that did an awesome job.
You did. You were the last one left on the show.
But that was definitely a super interesting sequence. Anything Andyland is always a blast for us to work on camera-wise, because the style of all the fantasy is much more pushed. It's all of a sudden the rules that we kind of were using for the rest of the movie were off the window. Now all of a sudden, because you're in the character's imagination, you can definitely go much further than what we were doing in the rest of the sequences. So it was a nice way to explore and try different things and go much crazier. But for that sequence in particular, one thing that was interesting was to try to keep that flow, because they are in his imagination and they are going through that song. We really wanted to make it feel like a single shot.
Without cuts, yeah.
Even though it is, I think it ended up being maybe a dozen shots or 10 shots or so, but it's all blending kind of seamlessly with some kind of like trick transition with the set or with the characters. We always found a way to keep things blending from one piece to the other. That was a super interesting challenge for us to play with. And having the music, it's kind of nice sometimes to have constraints, and having the music that kind of like lays the borders, the boundaries of what we can do, it helps us to kind of get that flow. And then when you see animation take over, it goes to the next level, which is always a pleasure to see the sequence evolving.
Yeah, and Mike souped that sequence, didn't you, Mike?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I mean, that was such as soon as I saw, I think it was the very first screening, there was a couple of just Andy paintings in there and the music, and it was like, I have to work on that. Like it was straight away, like the very first thing. And then it was like, and it was the last sequence I worked on.
The very last sequence we put through.
Yeah. So we had a fairly tight time frame with it, but it was just one of those ones that a lot of people were just like, please, I want to work on this one because it's just so different.
Yeah,
and the
you
song was
normally don't save
beautiful.
those sequences for the last minute.
No.
The thing you have to think about is like everyone has got their momentum and everyone can do basically anything because everyone's so warmed up and red hot. And it's great to see that in a movie over the course of a year and a half or 2 years as everyone gets this kind of energy together and everyone's firing on all cylinders. And so that's where we're lucky.
Yeah, everybody ripped through that sequence. It was pretty quick. It had like Theo was saying, the most fancy, a lot of fancy transitions, which are tough to get through the pipeline. But even with that, challenge, it really went through quickly, and everybody was stoked with the way it turned out.
It really did flow. I mean, when you use the word flow, it is just this flow, and it's one shot to the next, to the next, to the next, beautifully. And I'm curious of the team on the film, about how many is there? Can you say what the percentages of those on, the new film that worked on the first Boss Baby film? Is it most of the same crew, or did you have a lot of new people?
I don't know. It is exciting to have new people. And there's some people that you work on a film with and then they work on another film and then you get back together on a third film. And it's, or there's people that you've always wanted to work with that become available for this film.
Right.
I think a lot of people think DreamWorks is this giant studio, but it's actually very family-like. You kind of know of people over here, or you talk to them, or you have lunch with them, and then you finally get together and you want to work together. Or, the benefit of working with people you've done multiple films is you have a shorthand.
Right.
And Ramond and I have been working together for over 30 years, and so
Wow.
I can tell by Ramon's brows if he likes an idea or not, or it's just like wink, nudge, and But I think there's a great influx of young animators who are just really excited to do kind of older type animation and squash and stretch and that sort of stuff. And I think it was really exciting for them and exciting for us to see all this new talent kind of percolate.
Yeah. We had some people come back and guest star and help us out, when we were in development or whatever. And so, yeah, I can't say what the percentage was, but we had quite a few in the art department that were either helping us, freelance some pieces because they were on another project, or, people did want to come back and help, do stuff on this picture. And then, like Tom was saying, we had a lot of new people, and it's always great to watch young talent grow. And when you really put the pedal to the metal on a picture like this, I was really proud of the art department to see what they could do, and in a year at home was pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you always want to give people an opportunity too. We had some crowds animators who handle our crowds, and they really wanted to do shots, and it's like, okay, there's some shots for you, and they really rose to the occasion. And it's great to see people grow during a film, because when else are they going to have the opportunity?
Right.
It has to be while you're doing it.
I think we had a number of new department heads as well,
We did, yeah.
maybe too. And, it was kind of good because we all sort of blank slate. Everybody's trying to figure out how to work with each other. Good thing we did it on campus before the shutdown.
Yeah.
But, after the film, it really did feel kind of like family.
Oh, nice.
So it was 62% original people and 75% new people. So I don't know if that math works, but
Right, Tom is not a rigger.
Someone, I was going to say, we've got a couple questions from our viewers, and I'm going to ask these questions because I think they're fitting very nicely in with our flow. One is from Rosseteer, and it's, what was the inspiration for both the musical numbers and the visuals showing instruments doing the musical number with Tabitha Templeton and her father?
Wow. Well, they were kind of baked into the concept of the movie. particularly with the father-daughter story, when we're thinking about, well, what could Tim help her with? And
Mhm.
we're throwing out ideas like maybe he could help her with a boyfriend, but that just felt like that doesn't give her any strength or power or anything. And since Tim has an imagination, if that's what he kind of gives to his daughter, is opening her imagination up, and he helping her with this problem she's having in school, which is singing. And again, it's that love for, the mid-century animation, whether it was Fantasia or, some of the musicals, even Three Caballeros. They should really push the abstract of it, and I think everyone was game to try that. And we didn't want it to look realistic at all. In fact, there's these little bubbles in it, and we just wanted them to look like hand inked. And so there's a lot of technology to kind of make it feel like the animation we grew up in. And simply, Sue, and when we were kids, we could see all the Disney movies on the big screen because they would release them in the 70s and 80s. And I think there was a generation in the late 80s and 90s when DVD and VHS came out that kids would watch them on small screens. And I think what got a lot of us into animation was how blown away we were in this world of art that felt so real as a kid.
Yeah.
I just really wanted to bring that back into kids now to experience that, to go to a theater and the pride of being a kid's first movie, that maybe you can make an impression on them.
Mm-hmm.
So we just wanted to introduce them to what we all love.
Yeah. There's a cool self-feeding inspiration in there too, because we're like, oh, it would be cool, once it starts transitioning to Tabitha being in a little more control in that number, parts of her room and her character start feeding into this thing, and we just thought that was such a fun, and we couldn't have done that right off the bat. Like, it was because we built a world and we're really comfortable in it and there are things about our room that we really liked at a certain point. And then it was like, oh, let's start putting that into the fantasy. And that was, that's when it feels, it feels right. It felt correct. Okay. Yeah. Dr. Hockey would go sailing through the shot, or the plasma ball would end up, as a giant spear at the end. And that was fun to do too.
It's kind of part of our process too, is and we had worked this way for me on a few movies where, the structure of a studio is just so departmentalized, and it's, story, then layout, then animation, and then lighting and or ink and paint or whatever, that we really wanted to tear down the walls of that and let people, so we all kind of work through layout, Theo's department, and we get together, whether it was story artists or layout artists, and have everyone kind of get together and brainstorm of how to make the scenes better, in a way. And that musical number was a great one where we would get together and go, what if this? And, people would either sketch it or talk it through or come up with ideas. And that's how some of our best sequences were made in the film. And another one was the chase sequence through town, which was originally 30 seconds of them riding a horse.
That's so funny.
And it became like, let everyone play, let everyone contribute and come up with ideas, Theo, his layout team had as many story ideas as the story artists, or the animators had as many ideas. And so everyone could add to it. And that's how you make the best movie, is that kind of collaboration.
Yeah. The horse is hysterical. The horse is absolutely hysterical.
Horse is fun.
I love that character.
Yeah, I must say, like, the whole pony chase sequence, it was so massive. There were so many things to do. And Tom was really open to any ideas to make sure we can make it happen. And that was so great. That. And then the snowball catches on fire. It's just
Keep adding to, and the town kept growing and growing and growing.
It's like, what else can happen? Oh, and what more? It was, and the way you combined, especially I would say, from 3D animation, but as you're discussing inspiration from the old, really stylized graphic 2D animation, you captured that so well in 3D, which often in some films, the 3D characters are much more reality based, or, you know, they don't squash and stretch as much. They feel more real world. And I love the way you created a heightened reality animated world with this film, and the characters, you know, hearkening back to some of those styles of, but doing it in 3D, and then, you know, having the 2D fantasy. And it really was an animated, you know, kind of a wild ride and fun, which plays on so many levels, like the kid level, the parent level, the grandparent level. It really,
oh, that's great.
excellent.
I mean, and thank you again, Sandy, and Mike knows this because there's so many tricks of the trade when you draw it, you know, and strong silhouettes or certain mouth expressions that are kind of funny, like Mike was talking about, that we actually didn't have on the first movie as many controls as what Sandy gave us on this recent movie in a way.
I mean, our team took what, you know, the animator said they struggled with on the first film, even though the first film turned out great, but, you know, behind the scenes. So, you know, we wanted to make sure that it was much more controllable and more fleshy. And sometimes you look at, you know, like Boss Baby, you think, oh, it's simple, so it should be simple to make. But I think that actually I love working on stylized films because it's harder. Because
it is harder. It is harder in many levels. I mean, we would torture Sandy too. I want to.
What?
I'm wearing shorts, if you don't mind. And like Andy Schuler was just drawing a bunch of kids in school. And he just drew this girl. And we were just joking around a meeting and saying, wouldn't it be great if she just goes, that's the only thing she says. So we go, let's build her. And you know, from this one drawing, the modeling team just made her. And then talking to Sandy, it's like, oh, maybe just her mouth moves and she blinks. But you know, then the animators get a hold of it and like, no, we need her to do this, that, and the other thing. So Sandy was just fantastic. It's like probably already knowing we needed her to do a million different things and would have her group rig.
I love that we had the meeting. You're like, what if her mouth traveled?
Yeah.
Like her lips traveled.
He's a very funny character.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting question from Natasha Kopp. She's asking for each of you, who are your mentors that inspired your path to creativity? Do you have special mentors in your career path and your education path? What led you to being the artist you are today? Think hard. Everyone has to like, okay, let me think back in time.
My high school teacher.
Mentors. I'm sorry.
My high school teacher, Mrs. Stiles.
Nice.
After that, I was on the train, and then everybody else became, you know, conductors came on and off that train, but I didn't think I could do this for a living without having somebody like that in my life.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Well, my mom used to work at a school and she'd bring home all the dittos of all the tests that weren't used, so we had paper to draw on. And my brother taught me when I was 10, he was 11 or 12, we got a Super 8 camera and started making movies and, you know, with all the neighborhood kids, or do animation when it was raining and that sort of thing. And as we grew up, I, you know, wanted to come to California and get into filmmaking and animation, in particular, Cal Arts. And my brother was a stay-at-home dad and didn't have a chance to really pursue his dreams in filmmaking. And so there's a little bit of that in Boss Baby between the brothers of Tim as the stay-at-home dad and then Boss Baby, who went off and did his career. And it always became a question of success. And to me, I always thought my brother was more successful because he raised these two kids that are just fantastic human beings. And I think he was always slightly envious of me having the opportunity to make films and things like that. So, you know, you always want to find a personal angle on these movies, and that was kind of what kind of anchored Tim and Boss Baby to me as adults.
Oh, that's really nice. How about you, Sandy?
I used to read like Japanese manga, and like I like this Doraemon, this cat from the future. So I used to draw him and thought that it would be fun to do comics, but I didn't think it was going to be a real career. So I went to study, you know, something else, architecture. But then I found my way back.
Nice.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. Yes, absolutely. How about you, Theo?
Well, I think for me, it's a bit of it was a bit of a turn where when I studied, I always loved drawings and movies, but I had not considered it as being an option for a career when I was younger. And so I was going in a completely different direction. I was going towards mechanical engineering. And through mechanical engineering, I started to do some 3D, computer assisted design. And I really like the 3D aspect, but I was like, the mechanical side is not too much my cup of tea anymore. And then I discovered that school in France, I think it changed name, but at the time it was Superfocom. And I went to their open, when they let the door open and you can visit the school. Then I realized like, wow, what it was and what it could be. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And so for me, I guess my best mentor for the career was the school, opening my eyes as to, wow, this is actually a job that I could do. And here I am.
And here you are. Nice. And Mike, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, we had a family friend that used to run an animation art gallery in Australia and sell all the drawings and cells from Disney and Warner Brothers. And he got Frank and Ollie over when I was a kid. I was 10.
What?
And I got to meet them. And Ollie gave me his address, so I used to do drawings and send them to him, and then he would draw over them and send them back. So I've got a box full of Ollie drawings over the top.
Wow.
Of
No way.
so that was pretty good. And then
What's your address?
Like C- do over.
yeah, I was like just angry notes. Yeah, on there. And then for CG, there's an animator who was a head of animation now, Sean Sexton, who helped teach me CG when I did Animation Mentor as a little online class, and he was one of my mentors. And then he helped me get the job and has helped me along the way. And then I think probably Dan Wagner, who was the head of animation on Boss Baby, because he was hugely helpful for me on Kung Fu Panda 3 and a couple of other films, and just gonna help me along the way a lot at the studio. So I think they're probably the main ones. Yeah.
And Jeff, do you have inspiration to share with us how you ended up where you are doing what you're doing?
It was fascinating listening to everybody else, and I've been racking my brain trying to. I don't really have one individual who was like the person, but I always loved animation as a kid. I loved drawing as a kid, and I knew from a very, very young age that this was what I wanted to be a part of in any way, shape, or form. And my trajectory into it kind of changed over the years, but the goal was always the same. And so I think I have to give some credit to my family, who, even though they had no idea how I was ever going to get into this, they didn't stop me, and they did what they could to help me get there. So
nice. I think for all of us, I think we all could have the same experience of our families not quite understanding what we do, but supporting. When I got married, my mom was so angry. She goes, "You're going to marry a good for nothing artist?" And she didn't talk to us for a year.
Yeah,
I got that too.
That was the days of the starving artist. You can't make a living in art.
Oh yeah, we had those conversations. Yep.
Yeah. How are you going to make money?
How are you going to make money? How are you going to afford anything?
It's called passion, right? I think all of us could say you follow your passion. And if it's what you're doing it for, anyone going into art, you have to be passionate about it, because it's hard work. And we have our ups and downs like we just did with our pandemic, but it's there for us. I'll ask one more question, and we've almost been having fun here for nearly an hour. Here's a fun question. Did you have, or are you planning to have a virtual wrap party? Part of animation is always the fun wrap parties, right? When we finish films and celebrate it. And so are you going to do a virtual one, or are there thoughts of how you're going to everybody celebrate together?
Well, that question isn't quite answered yet, because we're trying to run out the clock against the pandemic to see if we can find that moment where we can all finally be together. We did get to see a lot of each other in person a few weeks ago. We got to run the movie. They rented out Universal City Walk for us for the morning, and we had it on like 18 screens. We had to socially distance and separate. We all couldn't be in one theater, and we even couldn't all sit together, but we got to see a lot of each other in passing. So that was the closest we came so far. But we're holding a little something extra in our budget to try to
Yay.
find a way to celebrate. It's not going to be the big party that we normally would have, but we're holding something aside for the day when we can finally be together in person.
Yeah, because it's really important that we get to celebrate what we did, especially
Yeah.
from home, and the Zoom toast just doesn't quite do it.
Yeah, even though we had started we had like a year and a half under our belt before the pandemic hit. We were only about 25% animated. No, that's not true. We were 10% animated. We were 25% through layout when the pandemic hit. So
Oh, wow.
a big chunk of the movie happened in the last
home.
14 months of the at home. Yeah.
Thank goodness. So we didn't have power outages too much. I think there was some, I remember some last
We had
summer.
some of that. We had some
We
of that.
did.
Yeah.
We did.
And we had people who kind of relocated to be with family for the pandemic, which we totally supported. But we had people in Louisiana when hurricanes were hitting, and we had people on the East Coast in blackouts and stuff. And so we were navigating all of those things.
Wow.
And we had a few people that we would like. Borja was in Spain, and he was
Mhm.
doing character designs for us, and and which seemed like kind of just an anomaly, to have someone cross site. But it's kind of exciting to think like, well, the best talent is all over the world, and if you can work with people all over the world now, it almost took everybody to have to work this way to make it more acceptable.
Yeah.
To work this way, and so hopefully people can do it, and still feel included.
Yes. Well, and we proved, this last year that animated films kept being made and animation continued in production when live action shut down and other things that.
Yeah,
We were the only show in town, see?
Yeah.
Animation as a whole,
Yeah, it's true. It's really true. So it was really wonderful that we can do this and enjoy it and then, have these wonderful films made. And, Boss Baby Family Business is a terrific film. And I'm thrilled to have had the opportunity to talk to all of you today. And if you have any final comments or anything you want to say, any last minute little add-ons, or if not, we'll close it out.
Just oh, sorry, go ahead, Cindy.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I thought it was interesting the way the family was represented in the second one. It's very diverse, and I think Tom made an effort to kind of mix it up a little bit.
Very nice. Yeah. So, well, thank you, everyone. And again, all of our ASIFA members, everyone watching, please see the film. You're going to really enjoy it. And I look forward to being able to see you all in person again, hopefully before too long. Maybe at the Annie Awards. Maybe we'll all see each other at Royce Hall. We're hoping, we think we'll be back at Royce Hall this year. So,
well, there you go.
Fingers crossed.
Just one last thing to say, it was incredibly, we're very proud of the team it took to make this movie, but just a big shout out to everyone who's making a movie right now, that's going to come out, because everyone knows in animation, everyone puts their heart and soul into everything that comes out, and every animated movie should be celebrated just because
it should.
It's a labor of love to the frame, and I don't think a lot of people really understand that. And so cheers to everyone else that just released a movie in the same conditions or is about to.
It's so true.
We're all one big family here, So.
We are the big animation family. And I love the fact that the animation industry, we're also collaborative and we work with one another. And I say, for me, I think of animation as the kinder, gentler part of Hollywood, where we are teams. Because we've gone to school with one another in some cases, and then we've worked on different films with each other. And throughout our careers, we continue. Like Tom, you and I've known each other 25 years, I think.
Yeah,
at least, if not 30. And, so it's like a tapestry. The threads of our lives kind of intermingle with one another. And we're all creating great art and things that entertain and we all enjoy. And it's something we're really proud to be a part of. I think we're really lucky to have the careers we do.
Yeah. You used to be able to fit everybody in animation into Dave Spafford's house and backyard on a Friday night party, including all the people that came from Amblin.
Yep.
And now it's just so huge now, but it's exciting. That's so big,
It is.
And that there's opportunities.
It really is. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. And good luck with the film. I'm sure it's going to do really well, and it'll be fun. We'll have to catch up again to hear what your next endeavors are, to see what comes next for all of you.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
Yeah.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.